start recording on my end with OBS. So then we
How are
close.
how are we opening our pod? We didn't come up with a name. Like we had an idea.
Yeah, we did have ideas, but and then how do I where's the button that makes you go big?
Oh, you hit
Oh, view.
view.
There we go. Perfect. Oh, and I can draw on this? Perfect. So, yeah, I guess so. Since we are recording right now, we should probably figure out what the name of our podcast is.
Mhm.
Um,
Definitely.
but first, before we figure out what the name of this podcast is, we should probably introduce
Alrighty. So this is Ian.
I'm Ian. I'm
Ian of the Worst Generation.
Yep, I'm the
YouTube.
YouTube Worst Generation. Ian, he, him pronouns, and speaking just a second ago was Random Reviewer, or Ashley, as they are known.
Yep, that's me. My pronouns are she, her.
And this is the podcast that you're listening to currently with Thomas the Tank Engine.
Something has definitely gone wrong in your life for you to wound up here with us, but that's okay.
Yes, so we are going to talk about Thomas the Tank Engine in excruciating detail. So I guess we might as well get started and stop staring at that. So
It's beautiful.
it is. I guess the big question is how did we get to this? But we got there from these. And
Yes.
if you would like to explain the story of what happened in events that happened in history.
Yeah, super exciting. So there was this guy, his name is Reverend Audrey, and he had a son named Christopher, and this is in the 1940s, and they didn't have a ton of money, and he wanted to make a toy for his son. So that's what you see up there at the top. The NW stands for nowhere, and the 1 is because it's the first engine that he ever made. And so Thomas the Tank Engine was originally a wooden toy made out of a piece of broomstick. So that's actually a broomstick handle there.
Did he really call his train Nowhere?
Yeah, that's so like in the NW, it's like because later, if you watch Thomas the Tank Engine now, stands for the Northwest Railway, but
Oh.
originally it stood for the Nowhere Railway.
That's
Yeah, like it.
great. Nowhere.
Yeah, and so yeah, it stands for Nowhere. And then Reverend Audrey took that toy and wrote some books for his son about Thomas the Tank Engine. And then, which you can see in the top right is that's one of his books is told by Reverend Audrey. His son continued to write Thomas the Tank Engine after his dad passed away. So you'll see some of the novels are also by Christopher Audrey, which is his son. Christopher Audrey also helped produce the original 1980s Thomas the Tank Engine, the
Mm-hmm.
TV show that we're going to talk about.
Yes. And there's like I remember that you had said that there's like an absurd amount of books, aren't there?
Yeah, there is. So Reverend Audrey wrote 23 himself, and then his son continued and wrote like 40 more, something crazy. You can buy them on Amazon. You can buy a complete collection. It's insane. There's like 100 of them.
Yeah. And then
Not to mention like the Thomas and Friends, then which I think was bought by, I believe, Disney. Now, and they own the rights. And now there's like a million more.
of course, yeah. And then like isn't Thomas get like derailed by Ant-Man or something like that in one of the movies?
Yes, that is correct. And in the new Ant-Man, Disney, to show off the fact that they had bought the rights to Thomas the Tank Engine before they released their brand new Thomas the Tank Engine animated series, showed Thomas the Tank Engine being derailed by Ant-Man in the final battle in the Ant-Man movie.
Poor Thomas getting messed up by Disney.
Honestly, and like they used a real like so and they used a live like the Thomas the Tank Engine you go see in person. That's what they used to film that scene.
Really? Oh my god.
Yeah, because it's easier to put a Mega Thomas in front of Ant-Man than it is to make Ant-Man tiny in front of a normal sized Thomas.
Who knew that? Who knew that shrinking people down just doesn't look good when you try and shoot action scenes?
Apparently Disney. Yeah, and so that's how Thomas the Tank Engine came to be in the 1980s. They took some of the ideas from the books and from the toy that Reverend Audrey made and thought, hey, what if we turn this into a TV show?
And I'd like to point out the lovely toys that we grew up with
Yes.
here. Um,
So Ian and I actually had these toys.
we did. That is not a lie.
Yeah. I had Lady. Toby is Ian's favorite, which is why you can definitely see him going crazy.
Yes, I
It's
love Toby.
his favorite.
Love Toby.
Percy and Lady were my favorites. Percy was my absolute favorite because he was always so anxious, and I related to that as a kid.
I just vaguely remember Percy. Anyways, so I guess the next one is going to be going over production and making the show. I haven't done a deep dive. I know that you've done a lot of deep dives on
I
this.
have. I'm so excited. I've done so many. You
Yes.
guys, my search history is insane right now.
So I just have to ask, I had the theory, which was that they needed to make a TV show for as cheaply as possible and make as many episodes as possible. And to me, it seems like Thomas would be the perfect ideal show to just make 1,000,000 episodes for as cheaply as possible. Am I correct at all in that?
You are not correct in that. So Thomas is actually custom built, very expensive. It was a custom made model train for the show. They had the BBC provided a budget for them because they needed a children's cartoon.
Mhm.
So they had a little bit more money than you would think to start out. So in the top right where you see that Thomas Tank Engine. So when Thomas was built off of like an old in the 1950s, was a model train that they repurposed for the show in the 1980s. All the way through Thomas's live action, it's the same engine. They just repainted and rebuilt him a bunch of different times because they don't make that type of model train anymore. And so in The Magic Railway with Alec Baldwin and Matilda, I don't remember her real name.
It's
I
all.
just remember that her Instagram is Punch the Nazis, and I'm like, that's valid. Um, Mara Wilson, there it is. I know I'd get there. That was the only time that they used an engine that wasn't the original Thomas because they thought that Thomas, because they made it in like 2002, 2003, and they didn't want to rebuild Thomas again because they didn't think that he would make it if they redid him again. And also that if you blew him up to that size, because you can see in the image here that they're bringing a camera down onto it, so the details don't need to be as perfect. But when you do a motion picture, and it was going to be on a big screen, and you would blow that image up wider. The director of the train manufacturers was concerned that Thomas, to that scale, you would see a lot of imperfections and a lot of like paint peeling, a lot of issues that the train had been around for like 20, 30 years now.
Yeah.
And and so that was the only time that they built a brand new model that you'll see. That's why Thomas looks so cool in the new movie because it's not the real Thomas.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, speaking of I'm gonna make the joke here. You know, as we can see, as the picture gets bigger, the worse it looks because this was back in the day when you had to pay for each pixel. So yeah, okay, cool. I just want to talk about the faces on the top right because
Yeah.
that is such
Hmm.
an ingenious way of doing it, but it's also horrifying when you just see it out of context like that.
Thomas had his face shaved off.
Yeah, it was real skin. But it is amazing to think that they filmed a whole show with just like a model railway. Um, and just
Yeah, no, it was the easiest way to do it without having a different train every single time.
mhm. And then what's interesting because it sounds like from some of the research that I did that they started to invest in at least for when it was just all actual trains going down the tracks and not the newer animated show that we're going to ignore for right now. Um, they up until I think it was around the 2000s, only one person did all the voices.
That is correct. They only had one person doing the voices until they started hiring voice actors. I believe it was like the 90s when they got like the UK got Tom and Thomas's voice actor switches a lot when they start
Yes.
adding a voice actor. He has a new one probably every 2 or 3 years. And
Weird.
so in like the 90s and stuff, they decided that they wanted Thomas to people to be more personable. And so they started having different voices so that the kids could tell him apart easier.
Okay. Which leads us to who was the original announcer, which that picture gets me every time.
The
um
deep dive I did on this, Ian. Oh my God. Oh my God.
but
So excited.
yeah, I did not know for a long time that Ringo Starr was the original voice actor who narrated Thomas. I guess he was the narrator.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was a royalty dispute or something, they just cut him out. And we were listening to it on Amazon Prime, and you can actually hear him in the first episode for like 15 seconds. They messed up and
Yeah,
left his.
at 4 minutes and 3 seconds, like 4 minutes and 14 seconds, that is Ringo Starr. They forgot to edit him out of that one shot.
And I,
So I did a crazy deep dive on this. I'm so excited.
yeah. So I think it's interesting because did you find any information on why they got rid of Ringo?
I know why they did in America. I don't know why they did in the UK.
Okay.
Because he's also not in the UK ones anymore either.
Weird. Okay. So because if it,
Yeah.
oh, I had thought that it was like a royalty dispute or something like that because of his voice, but Ringo seems like he really enjoys Thomas the Train because there's like a million pictures of him in a conductor suit.
Yeah. Yeah, and also there's a picture of him holding like the original Thomas the Tank engine, like the Model 1 of him at the studio. Like he really liked what he was doing.
Yeah, and he voiced it for like 4 or 5 years.
It was 80, like 80 to 82 or something. It was like 2 or 3 years, but like 4 seasons.
Yeah, so like I mean, I'm not going to assume that Ringo is like financially incredibly stable after the Beatles, but I would assume that he was probably doing it because he liked it and not because he was there for the money. Because I don't think Thomas the Tank Engine was probably paying him as much as some of his other endeavors.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. So, are you ready for my deep dive?
Yes, I'm ready for your deep dive. Do I
Okay, we
need
have
to?
to go back a little bit. So, the iconic Thomas the Tank Engine theme song. So, the theme song was written by Mike O'Donnell, who also created the theme song for Tugs, which we'll talk about in a little bit. This is important because Mike O'Donnell worked at the Beatles studio, their Apple studio, as a bass player. So he knew Ringo Starr. So that's kind of how Ringo got introduced to Thomas the Tank Engine, is because Mike O'Donnell was hired to write the theme and the music for Thomas the Tank Engine.
Oh my gosh. I
So so then sorry, what, Ian?
oh, I was just gonna say I could just see the guy like being like, "Oh, I think this kids show needs Ringo," and like,
Or yeah, yeah. Or I feel like it was probably the other way where Ringo was like, "What's that, Mike?" He'd be like, "Oh, just this train thing I'm working on." And Ringo's like, "A train thing?"
Ringo's just obsessed with trains. He's one of those like crazy train watchers. He just runs out. He's like, "Is that a train?"
Oh my God, is that a train? So Ringo's voice did the voice for Tom St. for like the first 4 seasons between like 81 and 84. And then suddenly he's replaced by George Carlin, which is the Thomas the Tank Engine narrator that we all know, because we would never have heard Ringo as Thomas the Tank Engine growing up, because by the time it got to the US, they had already switched in George Carlin. And the reason that George Carlin is in the US dubs of Thomas the Tank Engine is because he tested better with audiences than Ringo did. I don't know why they didn't keep him for the UK. I'm assuming probably a similar reason, although I don't know what audience prefers George Carlin over Ringo.
Yeah.
I
No,
feel like. That's rather unfortunate.
Yeah, no, I
But
mean,
that's why we have George Carlin, who literally narrates Thomas until like the next 15 years. It's crazy. It's George Carlin up until they start having their own voices in like the early 2000s or so.
mhm. Yeah, it's really odd because it's like I don't particularly like the Beatles in any way, but there's such a charm to just be like, that's Ringo Starr, you know?
One of the comments from the pool of people that they polled for the testers
Hmm.
was that George Carlin sounds like my grandpa and is more calming, whereas Ringo, like they didn't use the names, you know, that whereas they gave them false names, but like Ringo sounds more like my upset uncle, whereas George Carlin sounds more like my happy grandfather. And they just George Carlin just tested better with kids. Like he sounded more calming, whereas I guess Ringo just didn't have that same effect with kids. So they switched George Carlin in. Because remind you, none of these testers knew that it was Ringo Starr. So
Hmm.
I bet if they said, "Oh, this is Ringo Starr," then we would still have Ringo Starr as a Thomas the Tank Engine
Yeah.
narrator today.
Such a missed opportunity.
But yeah, but that's how Ringo started doing Thomas the Tank Engine, and that's why we have George Carlin now, because George Carlin tested better with audiences. Well, Ringo has multi-million-dollar album deals, so that's what he thinks about that.
Yeah, yeah. He might not be part of Thomas anymore, but he was in the Beatles.
Mhm.
So, are we good to move to the next slide?
We're good, I think.
Okay, next slide is good old Henry.
I feel like this is a good point to talk about sort of like the episode and like what happens in Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yes. So, when we had watched this, um,
Mhm.
after consuming a little bit of alcohol, I
A little bit.
something as far as like like I remember that one of my teachers in college had said like, when you write a story or a play or a performance or anything, like when you're done with it, take a step back and then come back and read it as if you're someone trying to find symbolism that you didn't intend in your stories. I feel like that's something Thomas the Tank Engine did not do because sometimes stuff comes up where it's like, wait, what? And the Henry episode is a great example of that.
Phenomenal example of that.
Because the whole idea of this famous picture is, excuse me, is that Henry doesn't want to get his new coat of paint wet, so he stays in the tunnel. And their response to him not wanting to leave the tunnel is to build a brick wall in front of him and to remove the tracks so that he can't go anywhere. Which, and then the episode ends. That's the important.
Yeah, the last image you see before credits is Henry's face like this. This is the exact image. We screen capped it because we could not. And like remind me like not all the way there, but I remember watching this with Ian and it just ends and I lost it. I was like, does Henry die? Like what happens? What happens to Henry?
Hmm.
Like I just like panicked. And I feel bad for the poor kid who like this is the only episode of Thomas he ever got to see. And he just thinks that Henry's dead in a tunnel somewhere. But like that's what happens to trains when they're afraid of things. They just die. You just get locked in a cave.
Steam trains were always very fickle machines, anyways.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, I feel like that's kind of a good example of what works against this show is that they are trying so hard to make the episodes so incredibly short that it ends up creating like a very rushed story that just kind of ends in awkward areas. That's just kind of like, well, that was the end of the episode. And it doesn't feel like it's actually like a show at times. It just feels like things happen and those
Yes.
things just happen.
Yes, no, I definitely feel like, well, because a lot of kid shows today have like the moral of the story type of thing.
Hmm.
And I was like, what's the moral of the story? If you're afraid of something, then they lock you in a cave.
Yeah,
That's how you handle your fear. You avoid it and just die in a cave.
exactly. A big man with a top hat just builds a brick wall around you.
As he's yelling at you, mind you.
Yes, yes, he is yelling at you.
Yell at you angry, angrily.
And
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, I think it's like the second or third episode of Tom Sangogen. It's on Amazon Prime, and I think it's just titled Henry. Is the name of the episode, but this is literally how it ends. Um, it's it's something.
yeah, it is amazing. Um, but yeah, there's like a lot of I have notes through episode 1 to episode 7, and then a little bit on 9 because we wanted to see Percy for a minute. Um,
We do. I love Percy.
and it is kind of like all my notes can sum up the whole story in like one sentence.
Okay.
And it's like, like episode 1, Thomas didn't want to get up, got tired from, and then got tired from Gordon, and then that's it.
That's pretty much how the episodes work.
Yeah, they all kind of start like halfway through the day, and then they just kind of end on like a random thing. I think it's the what episode is it? It's the one where, oh yes, so it's the episode 4, I believe. Yeah, it's episode 4 where we just kind of talk. We see Thomas for a bit, and then we're introduced to James. And how we're introduced to James is it's his first day of work as the new train engine, and he proceeds to have these. Oh, what's the name of the cars?
The freight cars.
Yes, the freight cars bully him, and he ends up running down a hill and crashing into a ditch.
Yeah, he completely derails.
He derails, and I think that would theoretically in real life be like a major accident. And why and I guess this was a thing, but it was like they did put wooden brake blocks on trains, and
Yes.
that was James's downfall. But he turned out fine, and some of the freight cars were destroyed. And the episode just ends with Thomas pushing the freight cars, being like, "You deserve that," and they're like, "We're sorry," and that was it.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that the freight cars don't learn from this. So like they've just watched one of their own like die, and the next episode they're trying to do it again.
Yeah, and it's like kind of constant.
Yeah, they like never get over it. Also, that episode with James is incredibly important actually, because up until that point, Thomas didn't have a job. He just kind of did odd sort of things. He either pushed freight cars, he like ran to and from stations, he helped push cars around if they were needed. But after he helps James and he comes to the rescue, that's when Sir Topham Hatt rewards him with Clarabelle and Annabelle in his own branch line. So that is where Thomas gets his job as like pulling passengers that like we see for like the rest of the series is in that episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he just hangs out with Clarabelle and Annabelle like all the time. Like I don't like from when they introduce Clarabelle and Annabelle, the passenger trolley things. Like he's with them all the time. Like I feel like every episode he's talking to them, or we just see him in passing with those two.
Yeah, I feel like it's also mostly because that's his job now, but also like I don't know, you get a new toy, you play with it all the time. Like, come on.
Mm-hmm. And no,
He has a
but
new job. He's excited.
yeah, and we had also come up with the idea that was like his relationship was with those two. Like he has like
Yes,
a
those are his
serious.
two girlfriends. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he pulls his
A
two.
consensual polypod, I think is what we decided on.
Yeah, he just pulls them around all the time. He's like, yeah.
It's beautiful. So there's a lot of like questions that Thomas the Tank Engine poses as well.
Yeah.
Like we're speaking of relationships, the relationship of the conductor with the train. Like,
Yes. How does it work?
well, I found out.
Really? They have a.
So there is, we're not the only people who wondered this. There is a lengthy Reddit subreddit about this,
Oh my god! Of course there is.
and it's insane. But I went through it, and so basically, what everyone has their own opinions and ideas. Some people are crazy, and that like Thomas is a metaphor for AI. Like the whole idea is that it's the conductors are only there to help like push like a full machine identity. It's like, and there's people who are like, well, no, they, and then other people are just like, the conductors do control Thomas. It's just like everybody's crazy and thinks the trains talk, so when in reality they don't talk at all, and it's all like in the conductor's head.
Oh my gosh.
So, anyways, what I decided on after reading multiples of these, so the conductors help feed the train and keep it going. They do not drive or control the train, but can put the brakes on the cars they pull by hand. And we see this when Clarabelle and Annabelle say they can't do anything without the conductor because their brakes are turned on by hand.
Any
So that's
left?
the conductor that does that. Whereas Thomas's brakes he can use because he doesn't need a conductor to turn them on.
Mm-hmm.
So they sort of watch over and offer advice, but they don't intervene. And so they're kind of like Thomas's parents. You know how like your parents will sort of like help guide you in the right direction, but ultimately like it's your decision. Where that's kind of how the conductors and stuff are, where they can like they'll feed you, they'll help you get started and help you get going, but then after that you're kind of on your own.
Of course. Yeah. Oh,
Anyway, what I found out. That was an hour-long deep dive for me to come up with the conductors are his parents. You're welcome.
I love it. I love it. Um, yeah. Some of the stories going kind of off of that just don't really make sense. I mean, that makes a lot of sense because in episode 9, I think it is, where it's either, yeah, I think it's 9, where Percy um, forgets, he personally forgets that he needs to whistle so that the signalmen will let him go. So he just sits there, and that's when Gordon um, comes barreling down the tracks and almost causes a major accident.
Yeah. I feel like, well, I mean, your parents also like let you get into trouble so that you figure it out, right?
Yeah,
I feel like there's definitely, but also you'll notice that Sir Topham Hatt only talks to the engines, never the conductors or the engineers. Just he like for example, if Henry he comes and yells at Henry instead of his conductor. I feel like that's important. Also because the trains can learn. That's the other thing is that that's people would pointed out on the subreddit is that the trains aren't robotic in the sense of like they're robots that will have conversations back and forth with you. They're sentient because they can learn and they can apply things. Like Thomas learns how to push freight cars, for example. Like he gets better at that. And so there's the argument of like because they're sentient, the conductors can't control them, but they help like sort of feed them and help keep them going.
that kind of brings up a question for me at least, because I know that on episode, we didn't rewatch it, but when we watched it the first time, um, Percy was with some other engines in a storage room with sheets over their head. So, were they sleeping or were they just sitting there for like 5 years with nothing to do, like sentient trains, like just sleeping? Or like were they like
I wonder, I wonder because you know how in like the second episode where Thomas like falls asleep because his fire went out.
Oh, that could be. So
And so I wonder if it's similar to like a coma. They're in a coma. They just like haven't they put their fires out so no time passes for them until they put reignite their fires.
I don't think it's like a coma. I prefer hibernation.
Hibernation is a better word.
They hibernate until they're
Yes,
used
they're
again.
like hibernating until.
Well,
So let's take a moment and talk about Sir Topham Hatt.
oh yes, I wish I had a slide for him, but we don't.
He doesn't deserve a slide. Okay, he is mean. He is vindictive. He is brutal to my main man Edward.
Oh
He
yeah.
although I have a theory about this. So Sir Topham Hatt is like really harsh and really hard on all the trains, and he talks about how he wants to have the best railroad. And he talks about that a lot. But I feel like Sir Topham Hatt. So I feel like one of the things that's super interesting about that is they're on the island of Sodor.
Mm-hmm.
There is literally no other railway. He already has the best one, as in he has the only one. I feel like it's part one. But then I also feel like his use of threats of like switching the engine's color clearly causes them distress. Like it's clearly causing them like distress. And I'm like, and like Thomas clearly has like a dependent personality disorder where he has to like completely please Sir Topham Hatt. Like, he gets so overly anxious about it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I feel like in episode 3 or 4, it talks about how Clarabelle and Annabelle know that Thomas isn't cross at them. He's cross because he wants to please Sir Topham Hatt. And it's like, that's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, I have a suspicion as to why Sir Topham Hatt is so mean.
Yeah.
And it's because we've all been bullying him his whole life. He's literally called the Fat Controller, and like every instance, like in the books, in like if you look up Sir Topham Hatt, it says the Fat Controller on Wikipedia, and then like in parentheses Sir Topham Hatt.
Oh my
So he's been
gosh.
fat shamed his entire life. So I feel like there might be his like part of the reason he might be so mean is because everyone's been calling him fat his whole life. It's just like he's not here for it anymore.
He can't take it out on other people. He can only take it out on his trains.
That is correct. So Topham Hatt is an angry child who has been bullied his whole life.
Mm-hmm. And it's a.
He
Oh, go
takes
ahead.
it out on his toys.
Yeah, he takes it out on his toys. It does
Mm-hmm.
whole like because I know that we had the question because we didn't quite understand the different colors of paint and what they mean for the engines until like well into when we were doing the research for this because we
Uh-huh.
originally just thought that there must have been some weird like train racism type thing
Yes. Uh-huh.
when he threatens James to be like if you don't behave yourself we'll paint you blue and then it started making sense once we found out like what because the trains are just color coded based on what they do, which I think is
Yes. Mm-hmm.
from if the trains aren't sentient and they're just machines, that makes complete and utter sense because you can just look at it and be like, oh, what train do I need? I need the blue one, like it makes sense. But since they're sentient, then you're creating like a hierarchy system type thing.
Yep.
But
Exactly.
the thing that I find more interesting is there is I didn't look too deeply into this, but the steam trains in like 2004, it seems like, or the 2000s, 2004 after the movie, it seems like all the steam trains really hate diesel trains.
Yes. That is because of Chomper. I don't remember.
Yeah.
It's the evil diesel train.
Mm-hmm. With the big hand that like
The big claw that he grabs other trains with and tries to derail them.
yes. Yeah, and he keeps threatening, I'll derail you.
Yeah, no, he is not a nice dude.
They should have had Ringo voice him.
Oh my god.
Would
Um,
tested better
did
with
you want
audio.
to go into what each color means?
Yeah, I can go into that. You might have to help me. I know that green means that they're a strong train, and that red means that they're incredibly important. But I
Yeah.
don't. What does?
So red means so important in the sense of like the cargo they're pulling is important. So it's like so for example, James will pull like the ambassador, or like James will pull like important documents or things that are like of higher like monetary value or political standing.
Okay.
Green is correct as strong, and so that's you're looking at Percy and Henry, and so their engines are just stronger, so they can pull like heavier loads with, and their cars feel lighter to them. So that's why Percy does mail, for example, is because it's a heavy load, but he can pull it because it's like a heavy thing, but it's short and stocky, and so he's short and stocky, so he can pull it easier than Thomas can, and
Oh.
that's why Henry pulls like huge loads of coal and stuff. Blue just means fast and useful. So you're thinking like Gordon doing the express and like Thomas doing his branch line with Clarabelle and Annabelle, and Edward doing like the freight cars and stuff. Not
Okay.
too heavy, but like fast and but for cars but for engines that are jobs that need to be done quickly.
Okay. That makes sense.
There's a whole there's actually a Thomas Tank Engine episode that explains it to you, which is how
Really?
I found it. It's called it's called Coats of Many Colors or Engines of Many Colors, and it's a story about how James like crashes into a paint factory, and so they have to repaint him. But they are out of red paint, so he needs to become a different color.
Oh,
And um, James, of course, freaks out.
yeah.
And I guess it literally, James talks out. It literally gives you like a PTSD flashback of Sir Topham Hatt telling him that he's going to paint him blue. No joke. And then James falls asleep and has all these dreams about what if he was a different color. And that's how you kind of that's how it kind of explains how the colors work. It also explains why James is the only red car. They only need one person to pull an ambassador, one person to deliver like important messages. They don't need multiple red engines.
Mhm. Makes sense. Um,
Also, like Sir Topham Hatt is so like Sir Topham Hatt is giving these trains like PTSD flashbacks at this point. Like that kid needs therapy.
yeah, James needs therapy for what Sir Topham Hatt has done to him.
You know, I could get behind Sir Topham Hatt being so mean and stuff because okay, fine, he's like he was bullied his whole life. He's fat shamed, but then he's mean to Edward, who is the nicest, most helpful train on the entire branch. Like, what? Rewatch the first season of Thomas the Tank Engine and tell me how Edward is not the nicest, most helpful train. Like he literally just tells you that you can do it, and he offers you help. And if you say no, thank you, he goes, "I believe in you." Like
Yeah,
we all need that friend.
we
And
all
Sir
need
Topham Hatt is so mean to him, and it bothers me.
yeah, we all need an Edward in our lives.
And so like that bothers me. That's the only reason I can't get behind Sir Topham Hatt. Like I get it. Thomas is annoying. Gordon's full of himself. James is really vain. Henry's afraid of everything. But you're gonna be mean to Edward?
Yeah, Edward's just nice.
Edward's just nice. How could you be mean to Edward?
And a good drinking game to play with Thomas the Tank Engine is take a shot every time someone says the word cheeky, and then you'll die.
That's so true. Especially in the first episode. Also, anytime they describe the way Thomas is built. Like, and they use the word short and stubby,
Mm-hmm.
like for every single piece. Like Thomas's whistle is short and stubby. Thomas's boiler is short and stubby. Thomas is short and stubby. And it's like we get it. Thomas is short and stubby. Is there no other word that you can use to describe the last next four features of this tank engine?
No, short and stubby. Only short. Only stubby.
Yeah, Thomas the Tank Engine. It's crazy because when it started, it was a tiny, like, just a fun idea, toy for a kid, you know, a fun idea. But it like grew into like a huge thing.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense because like I looking back at it, it's kind of I don't know if you've ever watched a Rocky and Bullwinkle show.
I don't think so.
Okay. It's I enjoy it because I grew up to it because my mom had all the seasons on VHS tape. It's not aged overly well on some bits, but as a kid I loved it. I can't watch it as much as an adult because of how it's set up, which is you get like 3 minutes of the main story, and then you get like a little show inside the show, and then you get another little show inside the show, and then you get back to the main one, and then it's over. And it's like it's so incredibly hard to watch because everything is so fast. And
Mm-hmm.
I keep finding that that's something that happens with Thomas is like every time I watch it, it's like this show is so short, it is so well built for kids because it's just like it just gets you in, it tells you a story, it gets done, and then it leaves. And as a kid, it's like that's great. As an adult,
Yeah.
it gets kind of hard to watch because you start realizing that the show is 80% just theme song.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah, no, the theme song is longer than the rest of the show.
But I
I
think
think, yeah, no, I think that's really that's something to point out because like if you look at, for example, like the Muppets, which the Muppet Show,
mhm,
it's written in that sort of same style, but it also has jokes in there for the parents, you know, for the adults. So it's sort of fun. It's like even if you're watching it, it's a joke. There's a sex joke in there for like a grown up or something that flies over the kid's head. So it's sort of so it's not as hard to watch. Whereas Thomas, once you get over the sort of like, oh my God, it's trains aspect of it, it's like, wait, what? What am I watching?
Yeah,
And you're right, it's not. But I feel like it does what it's supposed to do. Like it was supposed to be on the BBC for the 20-minute window for the kids' television in the morning.
exactly. Yeah, it's just like it's just there. And as a kid, I remember loving it, and I remember always looking forward to Thomas because, what kid doesn't love trains? Trains are just cool in general. I love trains as an adult, but
Hmm.
Thomas is just kind of a lot first thing in the morning or even late at night.
Yeah, no, I think it was crazy when we were watching it at the hotel and I turned to say something to you and then like the credits rolled and you and I had no idea what had happened.
Yeah, we had watched the first episode and we were just talking through it, and then we were like, "Wait, what actually happened?" And I watched it, and when we rewatched it, my notes are just pitiful for that one because nothing happened in that episode. But
Yeah, we were.
I'm sure if I was a kid, I would have been like, "This was a great episode. What happened?"
I still don't know. I feel like I watched it like 3 times now and I'm like, I still don't know what's happening.
Which I think segues really nicely about how the effect of Thomas affected us as a kid, and how we've grown up with Thomas into adulthood. I think I've got this. Oh no, I had that wrong.
Yeah,
Um,
no, next.
that we'll get there, but yeah, another show. Yep, Tugs.
I
Uh,
did a little bit of research on this guy as well. I even found an old Tugs clip on YouTube and watched it.
I know that there's a reviewer whose name I have forgotten who was able to actually track down the first and only season of the show and reviewed it. So I can kind of speak on that. I don't know if I can find who it is. I should have looked it up beforehand. But the video will be linked in the description of this video, actually, so you can find it there. But Tugs is interesting because I think it came out. Do you know when it came out? Was it like right around the same time as like the second season of
So it was
Thomas?
like in the 90s. So it was during Thomas the Tank Engine, but like before we hit the 2000s animation kick.
Okay. Okay, yeah, because what's interesting about Tugs
Mhm.
is that it has individual voice actors for each of the characters.
Yes, that is correct. It does. It's also the music is also written by Mike O'Donnell as well for Tugs,
Hmm.
the same guy that played bass at the Beatles studio and wrote the Thomas theme song.
Yes, and I also hear it's a lot darker. And
Yes. So I have to say, so shout out to Gamerboy 2000 on YouTube, who somehow found the entire series and put it in like in a compilation video, so you can like basically watch the whole thing now. But I watched like the first 10 minutes of it. It is dark and gritty, and like the characters are kind of mean and sort of like rough and gruff, and like it is not your friendly little tank engine.
yeah, no.
Like you have walked into the port of I don't know, a port somewhere and like these are like the boatsmen, like these are tough guys.
Yeah.
And
The
then they make fun of each other and it's like definitely I can see why they like nixed it, but I feel like if you were to remake the show but like made it for adults and like took that grittiness up a level, I
it
feel like it could actually play really well in that demographic. So I feel like it was just too dark for kids, but not dark enough for adults, and like this weird loophole where it would like where it doesn't work. But I
yeah.
feel like it could have worked if they redid it and just upped up the level for like adults. We could definitely get down behind that.
Yeah, for sure. I just found a reviewer that did a review of a whole series. That would be Steven Reviews, which you'll see a link to that video in the description here, and a link to. Did you say it was like Gamer Builds or Gamer Boy?
Gamerboy 2000, who has the entire complete season.
Perfect. That will be in the description too, so you can take a look at it. Um, but what I was saying before was these ideas, from these shows kind of get stuck in our heads and we grow up with them. And even though it's a show built for kids, we as adults take them with us and we do scary things with them. Oh my
Oh
god.
my God.
So, welcome to Train Hub. Um,
Oh my God.
I think that there's just such it
I guess
everyone's
I made this with you, and it gets worse the more I look at it.
it really does. It does get worse. I think it is interesting because you can kind of tell like how dead a franchise is based on when the fan fiction and fan art stops. And I don't know. It looks like Thomas stuff has just never stopped.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think in a weird way, Thomas has grown up with us, whether or not he knew it or not. He has. I just now noticed that down in the corner here, the tentacle one, I did not notice that was actually Slender Man, but that is a
Yep.
Slender Man Thomas the Tank Engine. So
I
I
feel like some of these are like really cute, sort of cutesy fun, like the Robin Hood one, or like the one in the top right where it's just him humanized, which I think is actually kind of cute and kind of fun.
mm-hmm.
And then like the robot ones and like Thomas like being an angry Indian in the bottom right is kind of fun. But then you get like, why was I born a train?
Yeah,
And the conductor licking Percy. But I
yeah.
think the like golden cow of this entire thing is my most favorite one, which is the comic that Ian found, which is my absolute favorite. And I don't know who made this and how badly they're hurting inside because it's very clearly a lot. And I kind of want, if we ever find out, if you, sir, if you made this and you want to reach out to us, we are here. We can contact someone for you because, I mean, you have to be in a special place to talk about Thomas doing cocaine.
Yes, is the train line down or am I down for train lines? Fuck yeah! I love cocaine. It's just amazing.
So I have a funny thing to tell you guys. Ian misspelled cocaine yesterday when we were writing up our notes and stuff. He spelled it cocaine, cocaine,
Cool.
and so now that's how Ian and I refer to cocaine. So if we ever say cocaine, that's exactly we're talking about cocaine.
Yeah, we're talking about cocaine. Oh dear. Oh no, 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 no. Wrong thing. Wrong thing. Wrong thing. No. There we go. Okay, it's back now. But
You
yeah,
did it.
yeah, I did. I'm so happy with myself. But yeah, I guess is that theoretically are we on to the next slide?
I think unless you have anything else that you feel like did not get mentioned from your notes.
No, I don't feel like I've got anything to mention. Um but yeah, I guess this means that it's the end of our first podcast.
Woo woo, we did it.
Yeah, subscribe to Random Reviewer, this channel. Please do that. If you're interested, check out my YouTube channel, The Worst Generation. Um,
Phenomenal. Killer content.
Killer content. And yeah, I think we haven't figured out a name for this yet, have we?
No, we haven't. I feel like we definitely need a name for our podcast.
We will, we'll come
We
up.
will announce it at the beginning of our next one.
No, you'll see it as the title of this video.
You think?
I
Cool
think
beans. We'll
cool.
know before we do.
Yeah, you will know before us. So
Also, Swam, if you see this, we will graciously accept any art that you send us
unlike the
for
last
our
Robin.
website. Unlike last Robin.
So
Just
please
saying.
send us fan art of ourselves.
We will graciously accept it, unlike last Robin, who I guess decided to be lame.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's the end of the episode. Um, I guess I need to stop recording now. Uh, is this how I stop recording?